Hi, I'm Mike Lowe for Digital Camera, and today we're reviewing the Nikon D5100 against the Canon EOS 600D. These two models were released at very similar times and they have similar specifications as well, and we'll go into the differences between them as we go through this test. The Nikon has a 16.2 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor, which is the same as that found in the Nikon D7100 model. The Canon is a slightly higher resolution with 18 megapixels and has a similar sensor to that found in the 60D. Both models have 3-inch screens that are a 3:2 ratio, and they're both on vari-angle brackets that can come out from the side of the cameras. The Nikon's is a 920,000 dot resolution compared to the Canon, which is a 1040 dot, which is over a million dot resolution. It's the highest resolution LCD screen you can get on any DSLR that's out at the moment. There are also other similarities between the two models, such as the continuous shooting mode. The Nikon is able to shoot up to 4 frames per second, which is ever so slightly more than the 3.7 frames per second from the Canon. The reason for this is due to the larger resolution and therefore larger files. But the main difference comes in the buffer size. In our test we were able to shoot 16 raw frames in one single sitting with the Nikon, compared to just 6 with the Canon. In use, the Nikon has an 11-point autofocus system compared to the Canon's 9-point autofocus system. Both are arranged in a diamond formation, so the reach across the sensor is very similar in terms of what you're able to capture, although the 2 extra points will give some extra diversity to the Nikon. Saying that though, the Canon has the most sensitive center point, which is a cross-type f2.8 sensitive sensor, which gives additional sensitivity when using in portrait and landscape orientation and using more advanced lenses. The difference really accelerates when you go into the live view modes of both cameras. The Nikon has a completely new live view system. It's able to focus right across the screen from edge to edge, and its speed has picked up so much this is now the fastest Nikon DSLR in its live view mode. By comparison, the Canon hasn't really seen any changes from previous models. Its live view is still perfectly acceptable, but it does border off the edges where it's not possible to focus entirely across the screen, and the speed of focus just isn't up to scratch when compared to the new Nikon. When it comes to core individual features, there are certain things that each camera has. The Canon has an internal wireless flash transmitter that the Nikon just doesn't have, and this is particularly useful for more advanced users that may want to step up and start controlling external flash guns, for example. On the Nikon there's an effects mode, which is one of its biggest sells, and this is effectively 7 different modes that work in real time on the screen that you can see the effect that you're using taking place, including things like miniature or colour sketch or selective colour. Now this may appeal to the more consumer market, although saying that, the Canon also has similar modes that can also be employed, but only after a shot has been taken. In many ways this has some advantages because it's possible to shoot a RAW file using the Canon and then change the JPEG that's also shot with it to have that effect mode employed, whereas with the Nikon you can only shoot in the JPEG mode when using the effects. Both cameras offer a 1080p HD movie mode as well, and it's possible to record at 24 or 25 frames per second with either of the models. The differences come with manual control. The Canon has the ability to manually control exposure, whereas the Nikon can only adjust exposure compensation. But on the flip side of the coin, the Nikon is the only one of the two to offer full-time autofocus, which makes it easier to point and shoot at a subject and use the new live view to automatically adjust between one focus transition and the next. As photographers, it's image quality that's often the clincher in making a purchase. Other than the increase in resolution and therefore a slightly larger output from the 600D, the resulting images from both cameras are very similar at the low ISO settings. From ISO 100 to 800 it's tough to tell the two cameras apart from one another. Images are very clean and clear of image noise indeed. The Nikon edges ahead in resolving more detail from ISO 3200 and above, and proves to be the better performer in dealing with image noise overall. Add a wider dynamic range that gives an extra level of depth in manipulating RAW files, and it's the 5100 that succeeds in taking the upper hand. However, the Canon is better at negating white balance to produce neutral yet realistic looking images. Overall, there are 4 main things that may make you want to buy the Canon over the Nikon. It's got a built-in wireless flash commander and a depth of field preview button that the Nikon doesn't have. Furthermore, the magnification of the viewfinder is slightly larger, which gives a slightly larger area to look at when you're composing your images compared to the Nikon. Lastly, there's the manual movie control that the Nikon doesn't have. However, on the plus side, the Nikon does have full-time autofocus in movie mode. It's got the better images of the two, it's got a wider dynamic range, a more complicated focusing system and far better live view. And given the overall difference in image quality, even though it's many at the high ISOs, it's really the Nikon that actually excels in this area, and just by a whisker takes the prize and is our favourite of the two.